Equipped. Well, our guest speaker today is Mr. Alan Schleman from the organization Stand to Reason, which is an apologetics organization. And if you're not familiar with apologetics, simply comes from 1 Peter 3:15. To give a defense in English is that Greek word apologia. It means to give a defense for a legal case, provide evidence. And so this falls under the umbrella of apologetics as we are learning to defend the unborn, defend life. And so Alan Schleman, I'll read a little bit of his bio provided on the back of your program there. So Alan Schleman has worked as an author and speaker for Stand to Reason since 2004. He trains Christians to share their convictions in a persuasive yet gracious manner. Alan teaches about some of the most controversial issues of our time: abortion, evolution, homosexuality, bioethics, and Islam. And of course, there's more. He has been a guest on both radio and television and has spoken to thousands of adults and students across the country at churches, conferences, and college campuses. And so, with that being said, hopefully you have done your wrist stretches and you've got a pen or pencil or your phone to take notes. With that being said, please welcome up Mr. Alan Schleman.
Thank you, brother. Well, good morning. My parents were born in the city of Baghdad, which is in the country of Iraq, as you might know, which, by the way, is not a great vacation destination. In case you're thinking about taking a vacation this summer, pass off on Iraq, at least for the next 2,000 years until things maybe settle down. But my parents did not raise my brother and I as Muslims. Actually, they raised us as Christians. And the reason is because my people, my ethnic background is called Assyrian. Now, this is not to be confused with Syrian, which is a reference to people who are from the country Syria, which is a country that exists in the Middle East today. That is a different people group. My people are called Assyrians from the country Assyria, which is a country that has not existed for 2,700 years. So just out of curiosity, raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Assyrian people at some point in your life. Yeah, it looks like a lot of you have. Chances are, if you've read any parts of the Old Testament, you'll recall the Assyrians, my people, are talked about in the Old Testament, which sounds kind of cool until you realize we were the sworn enemies of Israel. So consequently, that made us the sworn enemies of God. So that was kind of a bummer growing up and learning that information. But with a lot of therapy and counseling, I got over, the emotional turmoil of knowing we were the enemy of God. But anyways, enough about my problems. Let's talk about what we're here to discuss. And, there's a lot of discussion in our secular culture as well as in Christian culture about the term social justice. Right? You probably heard that term. And oftentimes when people use the term social justice, they're thinking of things like human trafficking or racism or poverty or homelessness or all these other kinds of social ills, which, don't get me wrong, we absolutely should care about these issues. I'm not trying to downplay them at all. However, curiously absent from that list of social justice issues is the topic of abortion. But if what we believe about abortion is true, that abortion kills an innocent human being, then we would think that abortion should rise to the top of the social justice issue list. Why? Because every abortion results in two victims. The first is the mother who is psychologically wounded, and the second is her unborn child who is fatally wounded. And so if we claim we care about justice, if we claim we care about social justice, or whatever term you want to use, we Christians should absolutely care about mothers and their unborn children. In fact, according to Planned Parenthood, which is the #1 abortion provider in America today, there are 2,548 abortions every single day in America alone. That's nearly as many people who died on September 11th, and this happens every single day. Now, that alone is troubling to me, but I'll tell you what really makes me even more angry is according to that same data, 23.7% of people who are having these abortions identify themselves as Catholic. 17.3% identify themselves as mainline Protestant. And 12.8% identify themselves as evangelical Christians. That means Christians are killing their own children. The most dangerous place for a baby to be in America today is resting in her own mother's womb. And so I want to talk to you today about how we can make that place safer for unborn children by making abortion unthinkable. Now, I know you might be thinking oh, Alan, that's such a sweet and noble, goal you have. Oh, I'm so touched that you care about unborn children and you want to change people's minds. But come on, Alan, let's be real. People don't change their minds on abortion. This is too controversial of a topic. It's too heated of an issue. People are entrenched on one side or the other on this issue, and no one ever changes their mind. Well, I completely disagree with that assessment. In fact, I know people change their minds because I've had conversations with people who have changed their minds, and I go and I train people, and then these people go out into public areas, and we engage people who are just walking around in the streets, many of whom are abortion choice advocates, and we see them change those people's minds. I believe, though, the real way to be successful at changing people's minds is to have the right tactics. And so today I'm going to teach you I'm going to teach you several tactics, but they'll be falling under the category of 3 main tasks that we'll learn in order to be able to make abortion unthinkable in your spheres of influence. Okay? And those 3 are in the outline that is provided to you, that was in your seats. Now, what I'm going to be teaching you, I believe, is so easy to learn that even a 10-year-old can do it. Now, the reason I know a 10-year-old can do it is because my own 10-year-old did it. Now, this is a picture of my son Nathan when he was 10 years old. He's now 17, so this is 7 years ago. He's now 6'3", much larger and beefy, right? But when he was just 10 years old, he would often hear about how I would go to university campuses when there would be an abortion protest occurring. And so oftentimes I'd hear about some pro-life organization who's speaking on a college campus. Maybe they're putting up graphic imagery on the college campus. And of course, this starts all kinds of dialogue and all kinds of other angry responses. And so typically what I would do is I would maybe call up the pro-life organization and just make sure it's okay that I'd show up. And I'd show up and just kind of mingle in the audience or in the crowd that forms and just start conversations with people and talk about the subject of abortion. And so my son would often hear about how this is happening. And so I live in San Diego County, and one day I heard about an organization that was coming to UCLA, which of course is a secular university, and there was going to be an abortion protest there. So I was planning to go, and my son said, "Hey, Dad, can I come with you?" And I'm thinking to myself, it's probably not the best thing to have a 10-year-old on a college campus during an abortion protest because things can get heated, people get angry, fists fly, all kinds of things happen, right? But he says, "Dad, come on, I'm sure it'll be okay. I'll be with you, right? You can protect me." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds good." I said, "On one condition, you have to first learn the art of pro-life persuasion. And if you learn that with me, then I will take you." He said, "Okay, Dad, sure." So I spent a couple of days teaching him the material that I'm about to teach you today. And after he kind of learned it academically, I sort of role-played a couple of conversations with him. And then the next day, we drove to UCLA, and at first what I did was I was standing in a crowd of people as they were sort of looking at this exhibit, and I began to engage a person standing next to me. I said, "Hey, what do you think of these pictures?" And the person's like, "Oh, I think this is terrible, blah, blah, blah," and we started talking, and I could tell he was, pro-choice in his view. And as I began to engage this person who was in favor of abortion, my son was just kind of quietly watching me model the very tactics that I had taught him the day before. And then pretty soon I had a few other conversations, and then I slowly started to integrate my son into that conversation. So I'd be talking to somebody and I'd say, "Hey, son, what do you think about what this person just said?" And so he would try to give an answer. And then later on, as the day carried on, I would kind of walk with him, and he would see somebody maybe signing a pro-choice, pro-life board, which is like a free speech board where people can just write whatever they want. My son would walk up to them, and as they're writing something down, he would ask them a question. "Hey, why did you write what you wrote?" And now my son's having this conversation that he initiated with somebody. And pretty soon, by the end of the day, I was there just, talking to some other people, and I would overhear some other people talking, and I could hear my son's voice, and he just walked up to people and started conversations about abortion using these very tactics. Now, I'm not here to say, oh, my son's a genius, he's an Einstein. No, he's not any extraordinarily gifted kid. He's like your typical average teenager, okay? So there's nothing special about like his, he's not like an Einstein or anything like that. My point in saying this is that even someone who is 10 years old can learn this material and use it. In fact, he was using it with people twice his age. Now, I'm not saying he was like, changing minds left and right, but the point is that he was able to traffic with them by using these tactics. And so if a 10-year-old can do it, I know you can do it as well. So as I said, there's 3 tasks that are essential to make abortion unthinkable. And here is task number 1. It's to show that there is only one question to resolve in the entire abortion debate. There's only one question to resolve in the abortion debate. All right? Now, the reason I say that is because people rarely talk about abortion. In fact, when I have conversations with pro-life people, I'll hear them say, yeah, Alan, I talked about abortion with my cousin or my friend or my classmate or my coworker, and we've talked for hours, and I didn't see any movement of change on their position. And when I begin to ask them questions about how those conversations went, it turned out that they weren't really talking about abortion at all. And see, the reason is because most conversations, when you start talking about the pro-life issue, you might start up talking about abortion, but the conversation will naturally tangent on its own. It might start on abortion, but the conversation will tangent to all these other related but very different topics. So the conversation might tangent to things about choice and privacy and rape and incest and back alley abortions and financial hardship and unwantedness and the cost of adoption and foster care and all these things. Now, if you're like any normal human being, you might think to yourself, how can I possibly be effective at speaking on the pro-life subject when I have to know all kinds of information about all of these related issues? Like I have to know about, the challenges with adoption or the cost of raising children or the statistics behind, rape and incest or, all the legal cases, and it's just too much. How could I do it? How could I be effective? And what I'm here to tell you is you don't have to know all of that stuff. I'm not saying you shouldn't. If you can know it, fine, great. But what I'm here to tell you is in order to be effective at making a case for the pro-life view, you do not have to have all of this stuff memorized or have knowledge about all this. The key is you have to know how to answer a key question. And that key question is this: what is the unborn? What is the unborn? What I want to show you is that this is the key question that you need to bring up in a conversation and make sure this question is resolved before you move forward in any further conversation about abortion. Because if you don't, you will be at a disadvantage for the remaining part of your conversation. All right? Now, let me give you an illustration as to how I know this is the key question. Imagine one evening, you're at home, you're in the kitchen, and you're doing the dishes. And I want you to also imagine, just pretend, that you have a, 6-year-old son or a 6-year-old boy in your home, all right? And so while you're doing the dishes, you hear your 6-year-old come up behind you. And while your back is turned to him, you hear him say, Mommy or Daddy or brother or sister. He says, can I kill this? Now, before you answer his question, what question are you going to ask him? Yeah, what is it, right? So imagine you stop with cleaning the dishes, you turn around and you notice that 6-year-old is holding a black widow in his hand. What's your answer going to be? Kill it. Yes, you can kill it. Hey, I'll help you out. You take one leg, I'll take another leg. Let's pull that sucker in two, okay? But now suppose you turn around and this 6-year-old is holding the neighbor's cat. What's your answer going to be? Maybe I shouldn't ask that. I heard a few people kind of nodding. All right. Let me ask you this way. What if you turn around and you notice this 6-year-old is holding his little sister by the neck? What's your answer going to be? No. It's like, man, this kid needs counseling. Let's call a therapist. Like what? Notice what this illustration demonstrates. Whether or not it is moral to kill something depends entirely upon what it is we're killing. You cannot answer the question, can I kill this, until you first answer the question, what is it? Right? So with that in mind, I want you to understand a key principle that is essential for this discussion. If you ask the question, what is the unborn? And it turns out that the unborn is not a human being, then no justification for abortion is necessary. However, if the unborn is a human being, just like you and me, then no justification for abortion is adequate. Right? Think about it for a moment. If the unborn is not a human being, go ahead, have the abortion. What's the big deal? If having an abortion is no different than having your tonsils removed or your appendix taken out, right? Or having a tooth taken out, right? Go ahead, have the abortion. You don't have to give any reasons for your abortion. Go ahead and do it. What's the big deal? It's just a part of your body like your tonsils. However, if you ask the question, what is the unborn? And through philosophical or scientific reasoning, you come to discover that the unborn is a human being just like you and me, well, then there's no justification for killing an innocent human being just like you and me, right? And so that's why I say this is the key question that needs to be asked and answered before you move forward in any conversation about abortion. If you ignore this question, what happens is people proceed forward in the conversation presuming the unborn is not a human being, and now you are at a strategic disadvantage for any other discussion that's related to this subject. Now, most defenses for abortion that you'll hear kind of on the street from people that, maybe at work or at school or just kind of in the street, most defenses that you hear for abortion completely sidestep this question. They ignore this question. In fact, worse, most defenses on the street simply presume that the unborn is not a human being. So, for example, you'll hear defenses like this. Well, people say, well, women should have a right to choose, or women have a right to privacy. Or many poor women can't afford another child, so therefore abortion should be necessary. Or no child should be unwanted. You can go down the list of all different kinds of statements. And notice, all of these statements are not saying anything about the status of the unborn other than simply presuming that the unborn is not a human being. But of course, think about it. If the unborn is not a human being, these defenses make perfect sense. Right? Women have a right to choose. Think about that. Should women have a right to make their own free will choices? Well, of course, right? And if the unborn is not a human being, then why should we get in the way of anyone making any choice? I mean, men should have the freedom to choose as well, whatever they want to do, right? Or women have a right to privacy. Well, sure, if the unborn is not a human being, then of course women shouldn't be denied a right to have a private life or make decisions in private. So, I guess, and if a woman is pregnant and if that pregnancy does not mean she has a human being, then of course we should be able to stop a pregnancy because there's no human being involved. You see, all of these defenses for abortion make perfect sense when the presumption is the unborn is not a human being. But now, for just a moment, let's just change that presumption. Let's just change it, and let's just assume that everybody knew that the unborn is a human being just like you and me. Well, now notice that none of these defenses would make any sense. Take, for example, the first one, women have a right to choose. Well, do women have a right to choose to kill an innocent human being like you and me? Well, no, of course not. No one has the right to choose to kill an innocent human being. So that defense wouldn't make any sense. Well, do women have a right to privacy? Well, if what you mean by that is women have a right to kill an innocent human being as long as they do it in the privacy of their own home or in the privacy of a doctor's clinic, well, that doesn't make any sense. You can't kill somebody just as long as you do it privately. Well, what about financial hardship? Well, if a woman has a child and she can't afford to care for that child, can she kill that child? Well, no, of course not. So, do you see, none of these defenses make any sense if you've changed the presumption that the unborn is a human being, just like you and me. This is why I say the key question that needs to be resolved is, what is the unborn? Answer that question, and now these defenses either make no sense or they make total sense, right? So this is why the question, what is the unborn, is so central to first, present as the key question and then try to resolve it. Now, as I pointed out, if you start talking about the subject of abortion, the conversation will just naturally tangent to something else, right? To things like choice, privacy, rape, incest, financial hardship, unwantedness, a medical disease or some sort of disease or dysfunction of the unborn child, whatever it might be. And so you're left now following that rabbit trail. And so what I want to do now is teach you a tactic that will help you to return the conversation that's tangent, to return that conversation back to the one key question, what is the unborn? Okay. Now this tactic is what we call trot out the toddler. Trot out the toddler, it's in your handout there. And I'm going to first define for you what are the 3 steps for this tactic, and then we'll look at a couple of examples of what that tactic looks like in conversation, okay? So the purpose of the tactic, and by the way, in case you don't know, a toddler we'll just assume is like a 2-year-old, okay? And trotting out a toddler means, to trot out a toddler means to bring out a 2-year-old, okay? But the purpose of this tactic is to function kind of like a funnel, right? A funnel will take, say, water or any kind of liquid that's coming in a wide range and narrow it down to one small cone, okay? Well, this tactic functions like that. In other words, if you're having a conversation and the conversation tangents away from abortion and it's over here or it's over here, this tactic will help bring that conversation back like a funnel to the one key question. And what's the one key question? What is the unborn? Exactly, all right? So that's the only purpose for this tactic, to bring the conversation back to the key question, right? So here are the 3 steps in this particular tactic, okay? And by the way, I use this tactic every single conversation I've had with an abortion choice advocate, okay? It always happens, even with pro-lifers too. But here's the first step. The first step is that you want to listen to their reason for why they are defending abortion. And if you can, try to summarize in your mind what their reasoning is with one word or one short phrase. Okay, so try to figure out what's their reason for abortion. The second step in this tactic, and this is the key step, is to ask, is it okay to kill a toddler, like a 2-year-old, for the same reason they just offered for abortion? Now, the third step is to then clarify that the real issue that you should be discussing with that person is not the reason they gave for abortion, but it should be, what is the unborn? Because when you ask the question number 2, hey, is it okay to kill a 2-year-old for this reason? They're going to say no, and they're going to say, but a 2-year-old's not the same as the unborn. Okay, and you're going to say, well, yeah, that's what you think. I think they're the same. So really what we should be discussing is, what is the unborn? Is the unborn like a 2-year-old? Okay, so let me give you a couple of illustrations as to how this looks in conversation. And remember here, we are not yet arguing that the unborn is a human being just like you and me. All we're arguing is whether that will make any difference. And what is the unborn? Is the unborn like you and me, or is it not? Is it like your tonsils? Is it like your appendix, or is it like you and me? That's the only question we're asking, whether it'll make any difference, okay? So let's go through a couple of common defenses that we hear for abortion. So the first one, women have a right to privacy. All right. So the first step in Trot of the Toddler is to listen to the reason for abortion. And I'll just answer these questions for this first one, and then I'll have you guys do some of the other ones here. But so women have a right to abortion. So first step in Trot of the Toddler is, what is their reason? Well, their reason is privacy, right? Women should have the right to privacy. So this is a simple one, okay? So now the second step in Trot of the Toddler is to ask a question of whether it's okay to kill a toddler for that same reason. And so here's going to be my question I'm going to ask them. I'll say, well, would we allow a mother to kill her 2-year-old son as long as she did it in the privacy of her own home? Now, I can tell you that virtually everyone you ask this question to will say the same answer. No, of course not. You can't kill a 2-year-old kid as long as you do it in the privacy of your own home. And then I'll say, well, then why should you be able to kill the unborn as long as you do it in the privacy of their situation? And they'll say, well, that's different. The unborn's not a human being. The 2-year-old is obviously a human being, so you can't compare the two. And I'll say, oh, okay, well, that's where we disagree. See, you think the unborn is not a human being. I think they are, just like that toddler. So the real question is, and here's step 3. So the real question then is not privacy. We don't need to be talking about privacy. What we need to be talking about, what is the unborn? Is the unborn like a toddler or not? So do you see how that conversation was going to go off and talking about privacy and privacy laws and all? And instead of following that tangent, I brought the conversation back to, what is the unborn? All right, so let's take a look at another example. Women should have the freedom to choose, perhaps the most well-known defense that's offered for abortion, okay? So step 1 in Trot of the Toddler is to ask, well, what's the reasoning for abortion in this case? And can anyone tell me in 1 word or 2 words, what's the defense for abortion in this example? Yeah, choice, right? Pro-choice or just choice, the freedom to choose, okay? Can anyone think of a question, this is step 2, that asks whether it's okay to kill a toddler for that same exact reason? Can someone give me an example of a question like that?
Should you have the choice to kill your toddler?
Perfect. Should you have the choice to kill your toddler? Or the way I put it is this. Do you think a woman should have the freedom to choose to kill your 2-year-old kid? And again, what is every person going to say? Even a Planned Parenthood employee is going to tell you, no, of course not. That's ridiculous. Of course you can't kill a 2-year-old just because you choose to. And I'll say maybe something like, well, why not? And they'll say, because a 2-year-old toddler is obviously a human being. The unborn's not. That's different. You can't compare the two. Oh, okay. So you think the 2-year-old is, you think the unborn is not like a 2-year-old. I think they are like a 2-year-old. So really what we should be discussing is not, does anyone have a freedom to choose? What we should really be discussing is, hey, what's the unborn? Is the unborn a human being like a toddler? Like an adult, like me, or not? So again, do you see how that conversation, had you followed the tangent about choice, you could be talking about laws and freedoms and all these, but now you're talking about something else. You're not talking about abortion. And so I used Trot of the Toddler to bring the conversation back to the one key question. What's the unborn? Let's try another one. Many poor women can't afford another child. Okay, it's another common defense for abortion. Let's Trot of the Toddler with this. Again, what is how would you summarize the justification for abortion in this case? What's the issue that it's bringing up? Financial hardship, exactly. Okay, can anyone think of a Trot out the Toddler question that uses financial hardship to ask if it's okay to justify killing a toddler?
Can you kill a toddler if you cannot afford it?
Okay, yeah.
Financially afford it.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, children are expensive, okay? I only have 2, okay? That's not very much. A lot of my friends have 4 or 5, some of them 8, right? Children are expensive, right? My son, by the way, now that he's 17, he's 6'3", so he's a couple inches taller than me. my wife's a health nut, right? So she doesn't buy like the cheaper cereal boxes. She buys like the healthy, whatever, gluten-free, blah, blah, blah. It's like $4 a box for a box of cereal. Well, my son goes through a whole box of cereal in like a day or two. I mean, it's nuts, right? Children are expensive. Okay, I'm not picking on my son here too much, but. So the question is, well, okay, is it okay for a mother to kill her 2-year-old toddler if she can't afford to provide for him? So notice, we're asking a toddler question using the justification they just gave. And of course, any abortion choice advocate is going to say, no, of course not. You can't just kill your toddler just because you can't afford to care for them. Then why should you be able to kill the unborn if you can't care for them either financially? Oh, well, that's different. Oh, really? How is it different? The unborn is not the same as a toddler. Oh, well, I think they are the same. So that's the question we should be having. Is the unborn like a toddler or not? What is the unborn? Do you see how, again, we're back to the key question? What is the unborn? So you don't want to follow the tangent of economic hardship. Otherwise, you'll be talking about economic hardship and the cost of, foster care or adoption or whatever it is. Children. What is the government programs are offered to care for? And then you're not talking about abortion. And one day you'll come to me and say, Alan, I talked about abortion with my friends and they didn't change their minds. And I'll say, well, what did you really talk about? We talked about the cost of caring for kids and how, well, you didn't talk about abortion, did you? You talked about government programs and you talked about the cost of raising children, and that's not the same thing. An unwanted child should not be forced to come into the world. Can anyone, don't worry, it's a doll, it's fake, okay? So no, everyone's like, and by the way, my daughter looked at that and said, is that Jenna Ortega from Wednesday? I don't know if you guys saw that Netflix show, but it's not Jenna Ortega. So can anyone think of a trot out the toddler question that uses this defense for abortion? What question could you ask? Except for you. Sorry, say it a little louder. That's right. If you don't want your child anymore, can you kill them, right? Or the way I put it is, can a mother kill her 3-year-old daughter if she is unwanted? And again, the answer is no, of course not. Man, you pro-lifers are crazy. Of course you can't just kill someone just because you don't want your kid. But that's different. Different than what? It's different than abortion. Why? Because then the unborn's not a human being like the 3-year-old. Oh, well, I think they are. That's crazy. Well, that's my view. So let's talk about that question. What is the unborn? Is it like a 3-year-old or not? So again, it always comes back to that key question. How about this? A child with Down syndrome, or insert whatever disease you want instead of Down syndrome, but just anything. They'll say a child with Down syndrome shouldn't have to suffer. Now, set aside the question of whether children with Down syndrome suffer or not. That's a separate issue. But let's just take their defense at face value. Can anyone think of a trot out the toddler question that demonstrates that even this distraction is not the valid discussion point you should be making? What question could you ask? What trot out the toddler question?
So if your toddler became sick, would you terminate its life?
Okay, if your toddler became sick, would it be okay to kill them? Yeah, that's a good way to do it. What about specifically this example here with Down syndrome?
If a child is suffering, should you kill them?
Okay, if a child is suffering with whatever ailment, could you kill him, right? Or imagine you had a 2-year-old who had Down syndrome. Could you kill them because they have Down syndrome? Again, everyone's going to say, no, of course not. That's ridiculous. But that's different. The unborn's not like a 2-year-old. Okay, well, that's where we disagree. That's where the real issue is. It isn't about Down syndrome. It isn't about choice. It isn't about privacy. It isn't about unwantedness. It's about what is the unborn, okay? So disability is also not the main issue. Now, so far, I'm just addressing, and you're probably, by the way, wondering, okay, Alan, come on. You're beating a dead horse. How many times are you going to say this whole trot of the toddler tactic? Now, the reason I'm hitting this so often here is because even though I'll teach it, I have people then go out, and the minute a distraction comes to the conversation, they follow it. And I'm like, no, you have to bring it back to this key question, all right? But these are all the easy defenses. Let's go to something a little bit more complicated, like rape. And people will say, hey, look, women should not have to be forced to carry a child that is conceived in rape. Now, in a minute, I will address the question of rape from the perspective of Trot the toddler, okay? Because I believe that even rape is a distraction from the main issue. But before I do that, I want to first show you a video of a conversation that took place on a college campus when we were doing one of these abortion protests, okay? And there was a woman there who was an abortion choice advocate. She had talked about how she was raped and had an abortion, and she's surrounded by a number of pro-life people. And I want you to see what happens in this conversation. I'm going to make a comment about the conversation. So take a look at this conversation.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure it would. And maybe you would feel worse if I was screaming in childbirth, if I was a mother who never had the ability to go to college, if I was homeless with this kid, or no money, no way of supporting it. Maybe if I was in a more hopeless situation, you could actually see and understand that I made the choice for a reason.
Discuss this with you some more.
I shouldn't have to hit rock bottom for someone else to say, oh, well, I guess the other choice was better.
But do you see that you're basing your whole argument on the fact that you were 13 and that you were raped and you got pregnant?
Yes, I'm basing the argument on the exception to the rule.
Right.
There is an exception to the rule, which means you cannot say abortion is illegal because someone's going to need that. Someone's going to have that in their lives to make their lives worth living.
So what about abortion in the cases of it not being rape, or a woman who's 22?
Again, she's making that choice for a reason. She has that reasoning ability within her.
Now, this conversation went on for about 40 minutes, where these pro-lifers just kind of went on and on addressing this woman. And the thing I want to comment about this conversation is that at no point in the entire conversation did any pro-lifer ever stop and say to this woman, man, I'm sorry you were raped. That's awful. Like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Like, at no point did anyone stop and think to themselves, I'm talking to a person who's just vulnerably shared that they have been violated and assaulted in a most hideous possible way. And so you see, oftentimes when the subject of rape comes up, when you're having a conversation about abortion, it is not a test to see if the pro-lifer has a logical response. Rather, it's a test to see if whether the pro-lifer has a heart. And oftentimes we fail that test because all we're thinking is, how can I answer this objection? How can I answer this defense? And we come across like robots who don't even care that someone shared with them vulnerably that they've been assaulted in a horrible way. And so when the subject of rape comes up, we got to stop and be like, granted, if it's a guy, obviously they probably weren't raped and got pregnant, but even so, they could have had someone in their life who that may have happened to, someone they cared about deeply. And so if the issue of rape comes up, we got to stop and say, man, I'm sorry, I'm not, if you don't know, but rape is a horrible, tragic thing. And if a woman shares something like that with me, I'm going to just pause my apologetics and just spend some time showing that I care about this person who shared this. Someone was asked, hey, was the person who did this brought to justice? Like, this is a horrible wrong. I'm so sorry this happened. In other words, we have to acknowledge the evil of rape and the psychological and emotional turmoil that would accompany such a thing before we just kind of rush to any kind of a defense against this particular instance in which abortion might arise, right? Because remember, look, as pro-lifers, and I'm sure probably a lot of us are Christians, and as Christians, the Bible identifies us as an ambassador for Jesus Christ, 2 Corinthians 5:20. And as an ambassador for Christ, if you think about, well, what does it mean to be an ambassador? Paul says, as an ambassador, it's as if God is making his appeal through you. It's like you represent God. You're an ambassador for Jesus. You represent in the way you come across to other people. And at Stand to Reason, where I work, we often say that an effective ambassador has 3 skills: knowledge, wisdom, and character. So knowledge is the content of the information you want to communicate. Wisdom is how to package that information and communicate it persuasively and clearly. But character is having a warm, gracious, inviting, and winsome manner about yourself when you engage in these ideas. And oftentimes the ideas that we Christians are pressed to engage in are controversial, are emotional, and something like abortion in the case of rape is one of those. So as an ambassador for Christ, we want to exude and communicate the gracious love of Jesus when we're talking to people. But if we come across like robots just answering arguments and not seeing that we're talking to a real person who's made in the image of God, then we're failing at our witness. We're failing to be a faithful ambassador for Jesus. Amen. And so that's why it is key when this subject comes up to make sure we take some time and pause. Like, look, don't worry about the arguments. The arguments will come later, okay? We have all the science, we have all the evidence, we have all the philosophy on our side on the subject of pro-life. So you can pause your arguments and get to that another time, all right? Make sure if this comes up, you do your due diligence to show that you care and that you be an effective ambassador. Now, having said that, even the issue of rape, I believe, if you were to follow that discussion, for hours and hours or days, is a distraction from the main issue. And I believe that even the subject of rape needs to be brought back to the one key question: what is the unborn? So thinking about our trot out the toddler technique, can anyone think of a question that uses rape in the context of a trot out the toddler question that can bring the conversation back to what is the unborn? Can anyone think of what that question would be?
If a woman who was raped has a 3-year-old daughter, from that rape, is she permitted to kill it?
That's right. Okay, very good. So I'll rephrase it, and that's exactly right. So I would say this. I said, imagine there was a 3-year-old girl standing next to me on the stage right now. Okay. She's got a ponytail. She's holding her doll. She's just kind of hanging out. And I want you to imagine that 3-year-old girl was conceived through a rape. Would the mother of that child be allowed to kill that child because that child was conceived through rape? Now, the answer that anyone, even a Planned Parenthood employee, is going to say is no, that's of course not. Well, can a mother kill that 3-year-old child so that that child does not remind her of that traumatic experience? The answer is still no, you can't do that. Why? Because that 3-year-old girl is an innocent human being. Okay, well, if you can't kill the 3-year-old girl because she was conceived through rape, why should you be able to kill the unborn if they were conceived through rape? And of course, the abortion choice advocate will say, but that's different. Well, and I'm going to respond and say, well, no, you think it's different. I think it's the same. See, the issue isn't rape. The issue is, what is the unborn? Is the unborn just like that 3-year-old girl standing here on the stage, or are they not? That's the key question. And so even the subject of rape, granted all the stuff I talked about earlier, which is the importance of making sure we acknowledge the psychological pain and turmoil, but apart from that, even the subject of rape is a distraction from the key question, what is the unborn? Now, because rape is such a thorny issue, I just want to offer another comment about it. And sometimes I offer the following scenario. I say, imagine a woman does get raped, and imagine she gets pregnant. And now imagine sometime after she gets pregnant, the man who committed this heinous crime is caught by the authorities. Let me ask you a question. Does that woman who was raped, is she allowed to shoot and kill the rapist? We don't allow that. I asked this question in Texas, and everyone's like, yeah, we'll shoot him right away. I'm like, whoa, hey, easy, guys. Everyone's like reaching for their guns. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just asking hypothetically, okay? But no, you're right. Generally speaking, we as a society say, no, a woman who is raped cannot shoot and kill the rapist. And so here's my question. If she can't kill the rapist who is guilty, why should she be able to kill the child who is innocent? Why should the child pay for the crime of his or her father? Look, I'm not saying we should kill rapists. What I'm saying is it doesn't make any sense to kill the child who's innocent. If anyone deserves punishment, it's the guilty party, the rapist, not the innocent party. But when we allow for abortion in the case of rape, what we're saying is we're going to punish the innocent human being rather than the person who's guilty of a heinous crime. And actually, by killing the innocent human being, we're letting the criminal off the hook to no longer bear the responsibility for what he has done. That makes no sense to me. It doesn't make any logical sense, of course. Why should a child be killed for the crime of his or her father? And let me add another final kind of situation here. Imagine you leave this conference today and you go to your car and you come to the parking lot and you notice that someone has taken a key and has just put a huge gouge in the side of your car with their key. And you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, brand new car or a relatively new car. You're all frustrated. You're like, oh man. Can you see what someone has done to you? Turn around, find some other car and be like, you know what? And just gouge out their car. No. Because after you have been victimized, you are not justified in turning around and victimizing another completely innocent person. And when we allow for a case of abortion, in the case of rape, what we're saying is after you've been victimized, you're allowed to turn around and victimize another completely innocent person. And we do not normally allow for that because it doesn't make any sense, right? We don't victimize innocent people just because we've been hurt. And so this is why I say even in the difficult situation of rape, I believe if that's brought up, aside from making sure that we've done our due diligence, depending on who it is we're talking to, I want you to see that even in the subject of rape, the conversation can be brought back to the key question, what is the unborn? And by the way, as disturbing as this sounds, sometimes people say, okay, well, what if a girl is raped and it's raped by her, an uncle, right? It's an incestual thing. So incest and rape. And they'll just keep adding and piling up additional factors that are just more hideous, more horrendous. And I would just come back, and no matter what they do, you can always come back to the same thing and say, okay, imagine you have a 3-year-old girl here who's conceived through rape, through an incestuous rape. Can we kill that 3-year-old girl? The answer is no. There's no scenario where that's ever going to be allowed. I don't care, whatever circumstances you make it. If you got a 3-year-old girl here, no matter what the circumstances of her conception, you're never justified in killing that 3-year-old girl. And so my response is, then why should you be able to kill that same girl just because she's inside her mother's womb? And of course they'll say, because it's different. The unborn's not a human. It's different than a 3-year-old. And I'm saying, well, that's what we should be talking about. Are they the same or are they different? What is the unborn? Okay, we're going to take a break in a minute, but are there any questions about this particular point before we take a break and head to our second task after the break? Any questions or clarifying comments about this 2 points that I've made? Number one is the key question that needs to be resolved is what is the unborn? And the way to bring the conversation back to that key question is to use trot out the toddler. That's the tactic. Again, I use it in almost any scenario. Oftentimes I'm invited to like a classroom. There'll be like an ethics class or a philosophy class or a medical school, and they'll say, okay, Alan, we want you to debate the whole classroom. Anything that anyone raises, you got to debate them. So they'll bring up things. And one time I heard somebody say, well, we need to allow for abortion because, I know, it was global population is rising. We need to make sure we reduce the population of the earth. And so, if you allow for abortion, that prevents a whole bunch of unnecessary people being born, perhaps people who might be homeless or, on drugs. And so you just, you get rid of them. So the way I trotted out the toddler in this case, I said, hey, actually, I have a better idea. I said to it was a student it was a philosophy class. I said, I got a better idea. Let's do this. Let's just not have abortion. Let's let these kids be born. Let's let them grow up to be about 15 years old. And then by 15, we'll kind of have an idea of what their trajectory is. So those kids that are on the street doing drugs and, bad at school, we'll just take them, line them up in the schoolyard and just shoot them, okay? And the ones that are like going to be the Einsteins, the Beethovens or whatever, we'll let them live. And that way we reduce the global population And we get rid of all the people that are kind of the undesirables. Let's just do that. That solves your problem better than abortion. Because abortion, you might kill somebody who's going to be an Einstein, right? And they're looking at me like, are you crazy? And I'm like, what's the problem with my solution? It's actually a better solution than yours. They're like, the problem is you can't kill 15-year-olds. I'm like, well, then why should you be able to kill them before they're born? Because that's different. How's it different? They're not human. Oh, okay. So again, that's the key issue. What is the unborn? Do you see? All of these objections are just distractions from the one key question, what is the unborn? Sir, did you have a question or comment?
Excuse me, it goes back to your point. You can have a discussion with people that are pro-choice and say, okay, so you agree with abortion, but the same people agree with abortion. Now, somebody goes out and kills somebody drunk driving, and that woman was pregnant, and they charge them with 2 deaths. So they're like being hypocrisy.
Yes.
So I kind of like, wait a minute, you're for abortion, but you're going to charge that person with 2 deaths. So make up your mind.
Right. So the point.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yes, this is completely inconsistent. So the inconsistency that you're bringing up is actually an inconsistency in the law. In 38 states in America today, we have what's called fetal homicide laws. If you kill a woman who is pregnant, you'll be charged with a double homicide. In fact, there was a very famous case in California. I think his name was Scott Peterson. He killed his wife or his fiance? His wife, yeah, Lacey Peterson. She was pregnant with their kid. He got charged with a double murder, right? Now, what's odd about that is we rightly recognize that her unborn baby is a human being that's protected by law. But if Lacey Peterson asked her doctor to kill that same child, it would be morally permitted and legally allowed. So how does her mere change in her attitude, her mere decision, change the status and value of an unborn human being? It makes no sense, and that's the inconsistency that you're bringing up, which is a very good point. Okay. In fact, I just wrote an article, if you want. I think at the bottom of your notes, there's our website, str.org. I wrote an article just this past week called Make infanticide law, make abortion laws consistent with homicide laws. And it's exactly this point. And so if you just search our website for that, I have a whole article about that. Okay, any other, yes?
I was just going to say that it's all about feelings these days. It's all about feelings. Okay, so you never see a shirt that's being worn by a lady that says fetus inside. It's always a baby inside.
Right.
But it's all gotten into feelings with the whole transgender, and I'm a doc. I despise the American Academy of Pediatrics, which I'm not a member of. I'm a family practice doc. But anyway, they have gone so pro-transgender, so you got little kids they're saying should be allowed to choose their sex, when everybody knows this part isn't developed fully until about age 26. So it's all about feelings, and feelings is just leading the lemons right over the cliff. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are giving a lot of weight to people's feelings inside, and he's bringing up the fact that as a physician, he sees how our culture is allowing kids who are not fully developed to make decisions about like what sex they are and other kinds of things like that. By the way, if you want perhaps the most important book that describes why our culture is the way it is regarding what you're saying, it's a book written by Carl Trueman called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. He basically documents how through the last 100 years or so we got to this place in a culture where we now have people who say, I believe I am, and if they're white, they can say they're African American. If they're male, they can say they're female. If they're 65, they can say they're actually aged 49. And the reason why he says this is the case is because we have given total authority to our inner feelings, to our inner beliefs. We are granting our inner thoughts and feelings complete authority to literally define our reality, which of course is absurd, but that's the reason. Actually, I mentioned Carl Trueman's book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. It's actually a really large book. He wrote a shorter version of it called Strange New World. Yeah, Strange New World. That's the one I bought is Strange New World. It's actually shorter, and it's the same book, but just with less research documentation in it. It's phenomenal, and it's probably the book that is like our current culture's like description of what's happening. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Okay, it's 10:15. It's time for our break. So is Sean coming up to announce our break, or someone gonna? Oh, there he is. Wonderful. Yeah, Sean.
Alan, thank you so much.
Okay,
really
sure.
appreciate
My
that.
pleasure.
Really great first
Yes,
session,
yes,
right?
okay.
Really practical, because even in the area of evangelism, keeping the gospel the main thing. And when you're having gospel conversations, how many of you guys know, if you've ever talked about Jesus with somebody, they want to derail that real quickly, don't they? And go off into all this other stuff, and you always have to bring it back to the main thing. Same thing with the abortion topic. When you're bringing about what is the unborn, they want to go off into all these other things, right? And so keeping the main things. Hey, today we, again, as we said at the very beginning, is not just about getting equipped and trained to have these conversations, but also to engage in the fight for life ongoingly. And I know some of you guys are affiliated with other organizations or churches, or maybe you want to get your family involved in the fight for life. And so we want to share with you guys a couple of ways that you can do that. And with that being said, I'd love to invite up Marty and Debbie Ellett to the stage with our Real Hope Center located in El Centro. So please give them a hand as they share about the work that they do. They'll share for about 3 to 4 minutes or so, share about the work that they do and how we can get involved with that. Thank you guys so much for joining us here. Yeah, feel free to join us on stage.
Thank you. I'm going to hijack your podium here.
Please do. It's more Allen's today.
Go ahead.
A Real Hope Center, like Ivy Life Center, is here to help women when they're pregnant, when they have children. And then we also really want to encourage you to know this truth and to spread this truth that women do regret abortion. We also do abortion recovery. Very, very important. You do know someone that's had an abortion, whether you know it or not. You need to be very compassionate and kind, and don't condemn them. But they really do need to get healing. So they can get healing. These are the signs I hold in front of Planned Parenthood, because I really want to help the women after they've gone in. If we can't stop them from going in, we want to help them afterwards. Statistically, 50% of women who have one abortion will have another one, 2 or 3 more. So we really want them to heal after their first one. Now, this one you really need to memorize. I don't know if you guys realize this, but once they take that abortion pill, they can change their mind. This is our living proof. Our 2-year-old here living in El Centro, his mom went to Planned Parenthood, took the first pill, said, I can't believe I'm doing this, called the abortion pill reversal line. We got to get connected with her, took her to the doctor in Escondido. She started progesterone. The baby is alive. Babies, after the first pill, they can be saved. In the United States, over 4,000 babies are alive today because of abortion pill reversal. So please memorize this. You have to tell everybody this. We're going to make cards. We really need you to be involved. We're hoping that we can get churches to put little cards in their bathrooms and in their information. Everyone sitting here, can save a baby's life. First of all, by being pro-life. First of all, by letting people know, like he's saying, it is a baby. Conception is a baby. And that you will help anyone that you know that gets pregnant to get through their pregnancy and all the help they need. Ivy Life Center, we're here. There are so many pro-life people in this valley. No woman, no family should feel like they can't have another baby. And I don't care if it's the 10th, 11th, or 12th. Be careful how you react to that, because it's still a child, okay? It's still a child. I don't care how many they have. It's still a child. So be careful how you react to things like that. I really want to encourage you. Every child is precious and a gift from God. So we can be pro-life wherever we are. And if you do know someone, or you can just express to them, they do need healing afterwards. They don't forget it. It doesn't disappear. They need to walk through it. So
Where do they get healing?
Well, they can call me, and we're going to join Support After Abortion. It's another national group where they can call. It's a 24-hour hotline, and we're just getting connected, and several of our volunteers are going to volunteer for that too, so that 24 hours a day, someone who has just left Planned Parenthood, they do feel terrible. We've talked to, when you hear from people that are abortion experienced, they will tell you that at that moment, they knew it wasn't right, but all their circumstances caused them to make that decision, and the people around them encourage them to make that decision. So after the decision is made, we do serve a very forgiving God. God does forgive, and God does heal. So we have a curriculum that we will walk anybody through on their schedule. They call me, I'll confidentially meet with them whenever they can meet till we finish. So yeah, there's help here in Imperial Valley. And it is very confidential. So please keep that in mind. Real hopes. We have cards back there, and you just call our cell number. Monica, Lucy, or I will answer it, and we will sign them up for abortion healing. Private, no one else will ever know. So please keep that in mind. Now, next Saturday.
Yeah, next Saturday, see these little luminaries here on the podium? We're going to make 3,000 of those and put them out. At next Saturday, we're going to start really about 3 o'clock. We put 4 o'clock on the flyers. There's flyers in the back for this. And this is going to be our 11th annual Speak Up Imperial Valley event, where we light 3,000 luminaries and put them out. We stuck with the number 3,000. We'll talk about that later maybe. That's how many babies are destroyed, killed, murdered here in the United States every day. We talk about surgical abortions, they're a lot easier to track, but we don't know how many chemical abortions are taking place, and they're going to soon surpass and minimize surgical abortions. It's very ugly. So, quickly, this won't take long because I have to go to the bathroom. So, listen, every one of us, I see a great mix of people here in the crowd, young people, old people like me. So, every one of us has been called. If you know the Lord Jesus Christ, you've been saved, you're called before the foundation of the earth, per the Apostle Paul, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4. You weren't just predestined. You were called before the foundations of the earth. Amen. What did you have to offer the Lord then? What did you have to say about that decision? You were called. And in John 15, the I'm the vine discourse, in 15, verse 16, he says to his disciples, you didn't choose me, I chose you, and I've ordained you to bear fruit. So listen, every one of us is called. We have a calling. Every one of us has a calling on our life. And you were not called to be a bump on a log. You weren't called to be a fence post. You weren't called to be a looky-loo. You were called to be productive, fruitful. So for heaven's sake, take a stand for truth, take a stand for life, and take a stand with Christ. Come out next week. Help us, commemorate, 3,000 abortions every day. Here's some great speakers, just like Alan, and be inspired to do something. Get involved. God bless you. Thanks.
Amen. There is a lot of darkness around us, but that gives more opportunity for the light of Jesus to shine brighter. Amen? And so just like they were saying, we've been called, and we have a lot of opportunities to engage in the fight for life. Well, yes, we are going to take a break right now, and we're going to be starting making our way back around 10:30. The bathrooms are right this way beyond that wall. I encourage you to stop by the drink station there.